For those who don't know me, my name is Harry S. Truman. I became the 33rd President of the United States on April 12, 1945, following the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. I had only been Roosevelt's Vice President for 90 days before fate forced me into the role of President of the United States. Almost immediately, I was put in the position of defending this great country for the struggle of democracy, which is World War II. Fortunately, the Nazis had surrendered in Italy and were being pushed back on all fronts. It looked like victory was at hand in Europe, but the Pacific would prove to be a different story and would be a long struggle before we finally defeated the Japanese Empire. It all started on December 7th, 1941. At 8 a.m., Japan launched a surprise bombing raid over Pearl Harbor, which forced the U.S. to join World War II. Then came me, Harry S. Truman. I went into office April 12, 1945. Almost immediately, I was overwhelmed with military secrets, but it was at the critical junction of the war where I had to keep my wits about me. Out of all the military secrets, the Manhattan Project seemed the most crucial to victory in the Pacific. As Senator, I chaired my committee to prevent wasteful military spending. I saw millions of dollars being funneled into this project labeled Expedition Production. It turns out, this was the Manhattan Project. Within an hour of being sworn in as president, I held a meeting with Secretary of War Henry Stinson and soon-to-be Secretary of State James P. Bernays. They informed me of the Manhattan Project, a secret project to build an explosive nuclear bomb in the likes the world has never seen. They informed me it would be ready for testing within 4 months. On July 14th, I was in Potsdam to attend the Big Three conference with Joseph Stalin and Prime Minister Winston Churchill to discuss the future of Germany. I had been informed 2 days earlier that a successful test by the Manhattan Project on the atomic bomb, the most dangerous weapon ever known in the history of the world, had been successfully detonated in a desert outside of New Mexico. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders as I faced pressure from Stalin's influence over Eastern Europe and the Pacific War, still ongoing, major casualties. I knew there was only one way for unconditional surrender, but I didn't even want to think about using such a destructive weapon for warfare. All this was on my mind as we discussed how to pressure the Japanese into surrendering. The Allies agreed to demand an unconditional surrender. I believed that a partial surrender would be a temporary fix and would surely jeopardize the future security of the world. However, the Japanese refused to surrender and kept on fighting. On June 27th, the Japanese Imperial Confederation adopted the fundamental policy to be followed henceforth in the conduct of war, which pledged to prosecute the war to the bitter end. This led to the Japanese kamikaze pilots. The kamikaze pilots' only goal was to cause mass destruction by taking their own lives. If people were sacrificing their lives for their country and their emperor, I knew the war had gone too far. It was time to end it. As Commander-in-Chief, I was confronted with a series of options by my advisors on how to end the war quickly. I could continue the bombings over Japanese cities, which after 15 months had killed 333,000 and wounded 473,000. Tokyo suffered 80,000 casualties in one day, and yet the Japanese kept fighting. I could order an invasion of mainland Japan, but after thorough study of the invasion sites, nicknamed Operation Downfall, we would only have 2 possible invasion sites. We could invade near the left side of the island, nicknamed Operation Olympic, near the Japanese city of Tsukuba. Or we could invade on the right side of the island, near the Japanese capital of Tokyo. But seen by the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Japanese would most likely have these spots heavily fortified. An invasion of mainland Japan was estimated to cost the lives of millions of Americans and millions of Japanese. I could also do a show of power and drop the atomic bomb on an unpopulated island outside of Japan. But that was impractical, considering what if no one saw it. My final option was the use of the atomic bomb. I established a committee to advise me on my options, and the final conclusion was to use the atomic bomb to end the Pacific War. On July 28th, I was getting nowhere with the Japanese leaders, and I alone authorized the use of the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb, Little Boy, upon the Japanese city of Hiroshima, causing 134,000 casualties. On August 9, 1945, the bomber Rockstar dropped the atomic bomb, Fat Man, upon the Japanese city of Nagasaki, causing 65,000 casualties. The aftermath of the bombings would prove to have lead radiation, which would injure and kill many Japanese for many years to come. After the bombings, a new world had emerged, a new world which now exists for the destruction of human history. The atomic age had begun. President Truman died on December 26, 1972. The dropping of the atomic bomb created a new frontier for warfare, international diplomacy, strategic weaponry, balance of power, and keeping the peace without using weapons of mass destruction. The U.S. also developed new policies and bureaucracies to manage this new atomic age. Some of these policies included the Interim Committee in 1946 and the Atomic Energy Act, also in 1946. Other policies have been made throughout the years. This also led to the MAD Doctrines signed between the U.S. and USSR. Other treaties, like the Limited Test Ban Treaties and the Atomic Environmental Act, were also signed. Many of the treaties have been signed by numerous different countries throughout the years. In the 1950s, nuclear fever gripped the American imagination. Professor Franklin of Rutgers University explained that the people had to engage in a certain amount of denial to block out the fact that the world could be annihilated within a couple of minutes. Changes not just appear from the government, but also within citizens' lives. Things from medicine, art, books, fashion, movies, architecture, and the way we raise our children today. The dropping of the atomic bomb created a new frontier for all of those things. Destructive art became the new art form. Architects fashioned buildings after rocket ships and satellites. Homes and offices displayed atom-like structures. Movies followed suit with movies such as Them, Spider-Man, and Godzilla. Godzilla gave a more lively aspect of the atomic age. Godzilla, or Gojira, comes to stomp Japan in the rubble for joining World War II. Bikinis also became the rage, named after the Bikini Atoll tests in the Pacific. Go-go boots and vinyl dresses also became the rage. President Truman stated that the atomic bomb will be the greatest benefit for the good of mankind ever known. President Truman would have been delighted to hear that the same nuclear isotopes used in nuclear reactors are also being used to cure thousands for medical research, providing third world countries with desalinated water, criminal investigations, food and consumer goods, and agriculture. The dropping of the atomic bomb still has a strong effect on our world almost 70 years later. The atomic bomb created a new frontier that is still significant in world politics today. Historians are still analyzing the dropping of the bomb. Researchers are still finding new ways to use these nuclear isotopes. But the question still remains, did President Truman make the right decision on August 6, 1945?